Assalamu alaikum everyone. Today we'll start our speaking lessons. And first of all, let's talk about speaking overall and get acquainted with the basics, with this test format. So the first question today that we should discuss is, what is the IELTS speaking test? So IELTS speaking test is informal discussion with an examiner who is a native speaker of English in English language to determine your speaking skills. So it normally lasts from 11 to 14 minutes and consists of 3 parts that we're going to get familiar with in this video lesson. And one thing that you should also know about IELTS speaking test is that it's separated from the main exam. So the main exam consists of reading, listening, and writing, and it's in other words called written examination, and speaking is separated and conducted either several days before or after or on the day of the test. So let's continue with the first part of the speaking, that is part 1. And in part 1, you are expected to answer to general questions about yourselves and topics like your home, family, work, studies, and interests, and etc. And part 1 usually lasts from 4 to 5 minutes. In part 1, you normally have 3 topics. The first of which is the most probably hometown, studies, or work topic. And the best way to answer to the task 1 questions is simply put them in 2 or 3 sentences. In this way, you make sure that you do not speak too much and neither speak too short. So in part 1, you normally have like-dislike questions or questions for frequency, asking like how often you do something, and etc. For example, today let's take the topic of travel, and part 1 questions for this topic would be something like, do you like traveling? Whom do you often spend a holiday with? Do you often travel abroad? And do you think your hometown is a good place for a holiday? So part 2. In part 2, you'll be given a cue card with one topic that starts with the word describe something, and you are expected to speak from 1 to 2 minutes for this part, and you will have 1 minute preparation time, and you will be given a sheet for taking some notes and pencil. And this part examines your ability to speak in length. So for the topic of traveling, you would have something like, describe a beautiful place you once visited, this one, or describe a trip that took longer than you expected. So you will be given a particular situation that may be something that happened to you in the past, or something that is going to happen with you in the future, or something imaginary, and you will have bullet points. It's like supplementary questions that will help you to organize your speaking, and it's not compulsory to answer to each questions in the bullet points, but if you follow them, it will be much helpful for you. So bullet points like when you want to visit, where it was, whom you went with, and say why you liked it so much. So we'll talk about part 2 and other parts in depth in our next lessons. Next part 3, here you will have some general discussion questions. I wrote general because, in the part 1 you were asked some personal questions about literally yourself, but here this is not the case. You'll be asked about a group of people, about people in the world or people in your country, and you'll be asked to compare past and present, and etc. So it's related to all people, not only you, and it is related to your part 2 question. And here you will have 2 topics, and it's best to put your answer for part 3 in 3 and 4 sentences. And questions in part 3 about traveling would probably look like, do people in your country like to travel? So here, if we compare it with our part 1 questions, there it was about you. Yes, it was asked whether whether you like or do not like traveling, but here it's about people in general and people in your country in general. How has traveling changed compared to several decades ago? Yeah, you will be asked to compare some trends, the past and today. And when do people travel as tourists, whom they usually go with? If you remember in part one, we had the question like, whom do you often spend the holiday with? But here it's about people in general. So do you think travel can or does change people's way of thinking? So it's a bit like abstract question, yeah, and you should have some time and good preparation to answer and come up with the ideas for such questions. And you will have the second topic that is somewhere near traveling. For example, you may have for the second topic of the part three questions about international travel, traffic congestion in cities, or other stuff that will be related to traveling, but will not exactly be the topic of traveling, but something related. So today we got acquainted with speaking questions, and it's very important not to confuse them because even advanced learners sometimes do not know the difference between part 1 and part 3 questions. So your homework will be, here are the common IELTS part 1 speaking topics, and your homework would be to choose one of these topics and write about 3, 4, part 1, 1, part 2, and about again 3, 4 questions of part 3 for one of these topics. This is all for today. Thank you for your attention.